So as I was saying, I have finished the free motion quilting on my sampler quilt here. And I just wanted to share with you the back and the stitches. Now, my last video, I was telling you that I was going to stitch in the ditch all along the sashing on either side. Stitching in the ditch, that right in that line there. And as I was free motion quilting, I realized that my whole purpose of the meandering and the circles that I was doing in my sashing and the meandering in my blocks were to keep it all lovely and soft and curvy. And I wanted to keep my stitching, as you can see here, about every half an inch to inch apart across the whole top of my quilt. Again, keeping the stitching the absolute same consistency across the entire top. I realized I don't want to bring those linear lines, of course they're, I don't want to bring those lines, straight lines, into my quilt. I don't find it necessary. I like the fact that this is really, with my meandering, has really puffed up beautifully, and I don't need to have those lines. This, of course, is the backing of my quilt. I don't need to have those lines there. But now what I will do, before I put on the binding and show you how I do the binding of my quilt, I wanted to just show you this block here. This was my one, let me see if I can get it close up. This was my my Dresden plate that we did. If you remember, I did this towards the end, or was it my last block, I think, and I was doing the burgundy cream, red, and bright white, and I incorporated that all into one block on the background here. And this is how I free motion quilted it. As you saw me free motion quilting my meandering stitch across, we can see it a little bit better on this block, across my entire block, on each block, and then my circles on each of the sashing. On this one, and on the heart, I just made it a little bit more consistent. I just did a little sort of just a sort of a floral oval, you know, little leaf pattern in the corner, and then in the middle, where I blanket stitched it around to applique it, I just did this sort of a 4-circle flower. With my free motion quilting, just to sort of emphasize. Then I stitched it around the center flower there, and then I stitched it around the edge. So each, with free motion quilting, it's up to you to do a design. Again, I could have just meandered across that, but as I came to that one and a few other of the hearts, I decided to emphasize that. So now my quilting is done. It is finished across the top of my quilt. As you can see, I did these circles in all of the sashing. Now what I have done, and again, this was a good exercise in quilting a large quilt, a decent sized quilt this is. I had to stop and start, which I think for a beginner is an okay thing. Like, I concentrated on quilting this block. I started wherever, like there or there, and meandered, and I did this block. And then when I was done the 42 blocks, which took some doing, I then concentrated on all of the sashing, again, which took some doing, because I started, you could go from one sashing to another, doing whatever, and then going down to it here. But what I did is, because I was getting up and down, several times, I would start my sashing on just one. I would start my circles, I should say, and I would just do my 5 circles. And then if the phone rang or I had to pop up, I would just finish that. And then I came back and did this, and it broke my quilting down into a very doable. If you're up and down and you have to leave your project, it broke it up. And then I would come back, and as you saw, I had my safety pins in all of the bits, and so I could tell where I hadn't quilted it. So that's another, I think, a beauty of doing block by block. Now, somebody did ask if you could quilt as you go. You make a block, and then quilt that. Well, that's called the quilt as you go method. And then you quilt each block, whether it's in squares, and it's very doable, but then you have to add the sashing. At some point or other, you have to add the sashing, and your quilt's going to be big anyway, because you're going to have to putting all your blocks together. Yes, they have been quilted, but you're still working with a large quilt. So I don't like a quilt as you go method on a large project such as this. That's my personal preference. And again, you can watch a lot of tutorials on a quilt as you go method. And again, I've not stitched in the ditch, and I'm absolutely fine with that. I love the look of the lines, of the circular lines. There's my circles. And again, free motion quilting, you absolutely have to go over. Sometimes, like in this instance, I had to go over my circles. And again, it obviously is not like hand quilting. Or a machine guided quilt like this, well, for me anyway, that's that. So now what I'm going to do is, I won't bore you, I'm going to take this quilt over to my sewing machine, and I'm not going to trim in anything off. This is how I do the binding. I'm going to stitch. I know my quilt's nice and square. I'm going to stitch with a nice straight stitch, 1/4 inch, right along the edge of this quilt here. With the backing and the batting, I'm just going to stitch along the edge, and then I'm going to go along and I'm going to cut my backing and my batting off. So I just have my quilt edge. I round the corners of my quilt. I round the corners, as you have known if you've seen me. The corners here, I will round them. When I get to the corners, I take like well, for me, I just eyeball it, but you can use a bowl or a saucer and mark, and I round them, and then I will show you. I round the 4 corners, and I mirror image so they're all nice, and I put the circles here a little bit smaller, so when I do round it, I don't really cut off that circle there. Or if I do, it's fine with the binding, but I round my corners. So now I'm just going to go stitch here, trim up my batting, and trim off my batting and my backing. And then I'm going to start making my binding. And I do believe, what am I going to do? I don't know. I do believe I'm going to do a striped binding. As anybody who's been following me, you know I love my striped bindings, striped fabric. And that would be, let me just see. I have to climb up my ladder. My striped fabric is up there. I got my ladder. So I might do a red and white stripe. Let me see if I can... I'm not going to go up on the ladder with my camera. Let me just see if I can. Yeah. So there's my striped fabrics. So as you can see, I have a bright red and white, small red and white. I will audition it. Again, bindings are so very important when you're making a quilt. You think it's only 1/4 inch around the edge of your quilt, like, oh, but it's the frame of your fabric. I was also thinking of doing a black binding, perhaps, since my backing is black. I have some lovely black fabrics here. I quite like the black and white gingham, but again, when you're choosing, oh no, but I do have a black and white gingham that has red in it. But if you have to be very careful with the pattern if you're using a gingham. I like gingham. With stripes, you don't have to. I quite like, now here's my reds. So I'm going to go and just audition some of these different fabrics that I have. Maybe do something like this. See what this one looks like. I usually have Elliot. I quite like red and white dots. That might look nice. I like dots and stripes for my quilt bindings. I think they add a touch of real happy. I like that. And again, I'll take you over here. Again, my quilt backing is the black, so I could use black or whatever. And so I'm going to do that right now. I won't bore you anymore. But I just wanted to show you, I wanted to share with you, remember when I was in, many years ago, I was telling you I was in my kitchen at one point, and I was showing you my kitchen island, and I thought at one point, I'm filming into the light here, sorry about that, I thought with the kitchen renovation at our old home, my kitchen island was going to be used. It's not. Let's see if I can get over here. Yeah, it's not. So my husband went and got my kitchen island because they weren't going to use it in the new kitchen, which is being renovated in our house that's to be sold. And so he brought it home. I was so thrilled. And so I got rid of my ironing board, and I have made it into an ironing station here. I actually have to, this is like a butcher block under here. So I just stuck some batting and some fabric. So my husband's going to actually make a proper pressing a board there. But there I got my island and I got my quilts back. Jen was storing some of my lovely quilts that were in my front room. Again, there's a video. I got some of my quilts back. Oops, it's getting real dark there. So I have that island. I'm so thrilled about it. I'm so thrilled. And then I also have this island here that I had purchased for my cutting table. And oh yes, I have my dumbbells there. Yeah. And then so what we did is I sort of changed it around here, and here's my little seating area. A little bit of a mess right now. Here's my little seating area, because we had changed this around. So there's my bicycle quilt. So here's my seating area in our sewing room, which makes a little bit more sense now. And then there's my two cutting tables, or one cutting table and one ironing station. So yeah, my sewing room is coming on. Oh, my husband still has to put up the film. That's the film on this my doors. We had run out of film. He put the film on the windows, so the film is over there. Oops, getting a bit dark. Again, this is how it comes. You can check back at the other videos, the Vista Lumar window film. So yeah, so yeah, I'm real pleased about my quilts coming on real good. I'm just going to now go trim it off, do this, select my bind.
Yeah, we should
so I'm coming into the kitchen because I heard this noise. And what is Maxwell doing? Maxwell, what are you doing?
Well, that explains it back there.
So Maxwell was desperate to make a smoothie this morning. And so, with his lovely handy dandy smoothie maker, how do you make this? Which one are you making now?
Random.
You're making a random one.
Yeah.
What does it have in it?
Blueberry and banana.
Blueberry and banana, and I see strawberries out. You didn't put strawberries in it?
Nope.
Oh, and chocolate syrup. Is that any good?
We'll find out.
Okay.
Thingamajig. Here it is.
This was the smoothie maker. We digress. I was doing binding and I heard Maxwell in here.
What?
I heard Maxwell in here with this very quiet NutriBullet that Chip and Aaron. Ah! Oh wow! Where did you go? That is so.
Sorry to headphone users.
That is so loud. You love. Oh my word. Maxwell loves his smoothies. Is it done? Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Two different colors.
So you made two different ones. Oh, so you did use the strawberries and the blueberries, chocolate and banana. So
that one just had blueberry and banana.
Oh.
That's blueberry.
Oh, you didn't use it.
No, blueberry and strawberry. Blueberry, banana.
Blueberry and banana, yeah. So Daddy's going to come home and going to have some?
Nah, all for myself.
Maxwell and his smoothies.
Bye.
Bye. true friends. Love you when you're down, happy when you're up, right by your side when trials come. Speak up if you're wrong, commend you when you're right, keep you on track. It's a graceful life, and we keep doing all of the end, and that's a true friend. Love at all times, and we were so in trouble here, so giving all right, say our prayers to let it go. Whether the old or whether the young, we all gotta stay together, and one day soon we'll be in paradise. True friends, love you when you're down, happy when you're up, right by your side when trials come. Speak of every wrong, commend you when you're right, keep you on track to the graceful life, and we keep doing all that first right to the end, and that's the truth. Someone you trust, someone who cares about you, deserves to hold up, a shoulder to lean on, and the right words to help you remember. Yeah, that's a true friend. True friends, love you when you're down, happy when you're up, right by your side when trials come. Speak up if you're wrong, commend you when you're right, keep you on track in the graceful life, and we keep doing all the first right to the end. True friends, love you when you're down, happy when you're up, right by your side when trials come. Speak up if you're wrong, commend you when you're right, keep you on track in the graceful life, and we keep doing all the first right to the end, and that's the true friend. That's the true friend. Oh, that's the true friend. There we go. So I am at the point where I have chosen, or I'm choosing my binding. And actually, I think I'm gonna, because I'm waffling on a bit on this video, I think I'm gonna cut this short. And then the next video will show me making the binding and stitching the binding on. I don't want this to go on too long. But what I have figured out, I don't think I'm going to use a striped binding on my quilt. It's so expected, but I'm not going to do that. But I have chosen a few. I've chosen a few polka dots. I quite like the idea of polka dots, and I've pulled these few. But this was my thought process. This red and white polka dot here, which I quite like. It's a bit happy. It doesn't quite. I don't know. It doesn't quite, to my mind. fit the criteria of what my quilt wants to be. I don't, let me just see, it's just, I'm trying to mess about here, just 1/4 of an inch around here, but I don't love that. Don't love that one, so that's out of the picture. And then I pulled this one, this red and white, which really changes up the whole look. It makes it a lot brighter, it makes it a lot summerier. But again, it has very large dots, and using a large dot sometimes on a binding, you tend to, unless you cut your binding exactly perfectly, like almost pattern match it, where you're going to fold it and then fold it again. You might get sporadic spaces. So although I like that and it lifts my quilt, I'm not going to use that one. Now I pulled this black and sort of cream dot as opposed to bright white dot, and I quite like this one as it's sort of, it looks good on the back, and it sort of brings in more of a muted shade as opposed to bright white, even though I'm using bright white, but then I'm using the cream, and I quite like that. It's sort of like is an unexpected touch of black and white dots, but with this sort of line, with this sort of linear pattern in it also, and I quite like it on the back. Oh, there goes my phone. So I quite like that one because it's almost a little bit of a dulled down effect as being too real bright. It's almost a bit serious. I quite like that dot, that one. Now I also pulled a bright white, black and white all over dot, which I quite like here. I quite like that look. Yeah, I quite like that one. But I think I'm liking this one. Oh, and I did pull this black and white dot, but again, because it's an all over pattern, I would have to be very careful, and I don't love that. I don't love that. You might see black, you might see white. So I actually thought, as I was auditioning these prints, I really did like, it's a little bit unexpected, because usually you would think I would pull red and white stripe, but I quite like this black and sort of cream patterned dot. It's, as I said, to my mind, and if it makes any sense whatsoever, it's a little bit more serious, even though it's a dot, even though it's a polka dot, and polka dots are happy and fun because it has this pattern in it. I quite like it. It's sort of almost, it almost sort of makes my quilt a little bit more serious and brings a little bit more of an elegance to the edge. That's my plan, that's my story, I'm sticking to it. So this is my binding. Now, and again, I'm not going to continue this video because I'm all over the place showing Maxwell and all, but I'm going to cut this, I have enough of it. I'm going to cut this, I cut my binding in 2.5 inch strips. Excuse me, I cut my binding in 2.25 inch strips. I will connect my binding into 1/4 inch strip, long strip around however I just sort of keep chopping off and make sure I have enough to go around. In patterns they tell you exactly the inches. I don't do that. I just make sure I have enough to go around and around my entire quilt. I will join them with a bias seam, with a slanted seam. So I put my fabrics like this, I sew like that, so they end up a long seam, a diagonal seam. But I will show you in my next video how I've attached my binding strip. I will then fold it in half and then wrap it around, and I will show you how I attach it. I attach my binding to the back of my quilt. I attach my binding to the back of my quilt here, and then I turn it to the front and I machine stitch it down. Most people attach their bindings to the front of their quilt and hand stitch it to the back of the quilt. I don't do it that way. But that will be for the next video. I just wanted to say hello. This is where I am. This is my binding that I've chosen, a little bit different than I perhaps would have done before. But I just wanted the dots, but these dots are dots are not it. I'm using that dot, a little bit different. Okay, folks, so thank you so much for following along with me in my day here. Please stay safe. We're sort of self-quarantined with this coronavirus. No one's messing about. I do not know if Jen and I will be going to the quilt show, which is at the end of the month. but we are going to stay safe. Everybody has gotten their rations in. We're hunkering down. Our kids have their own businesses. They have been shutting down their businesses, and everybody's just sort of staying close to home and not breathing over everybody, not hugging anybody, staying safe, nothing to be messed with. So please, and if you're elderly, please, special care to take care of yourselves. Yeah, this is nothing to be messing with. All right, folks, thank you so much for your time, and have a lovely day. See you later. Bye.